Members of council, administration staff, and members that are in the gallery. Welcome to the Governance and Priorities meeting for May 1st. As you can see looking outside the window, spring is fully upon us, and so is the warmer weather. If you are not signed up for Stony Plain Alerts, please do. You receive a lot of good information from the town of Stony Plain. The one that just recently came out this afternoon was that Stony Plain now has a fire advisory, which means please do not have a fire if you don't need to, because there is a lot of dry brush around the communities. There is currently a fire that is out in Paul First Nation and also down by the Trestle Creek area. There's also one that just started this afternoon, north side of Anthony Henday and 16 and 16. So again, it is very dry out there. So Stony Plain has issued a fire advisory. So all its residents, please do not start a fire if you do not need to. Thank you. With that, members of council, there's an agenda before you. Anything to add, administration?
Nothing to add, Your Worship.
Thank you. That Deputy Mayor, I'll ask you to make the motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move that Town Council adopt the April 24th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda as amended with item 4.20, 4.2 in a closed session. Is that correct?
This is the not
Wrong
the,
slide. I didn't read anything in a closed session.
This is April 24th. That was on the slide there.
Yeah.
That didn't sound right when I said it. Do you want me to just move off of here? Or
Just move it off. As it is just adoption of the agenda as presented.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I move that the agenda for Monday, May 1, 2023, council agenda be accepted.
Okay. Call question, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving on to number 3 of our agenda is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on anything that's not on the current agenda. Administration, has anybody registered to speak?
Through your worship, no, there has not been.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in the gallery who would like to speak to council on anything that's not on the current agenda? Okay. See none, we'll move on to number 4, which is the presentations and delegations. Today, we're lucky enough to have 3 presentations today, so it's going to be a very, very informative evening for us. First up is the RCMP quarterly update. Inspector. And again, if we just ask you to speak directly into the mic as when you do your presentation.
Great, thank you very much, Mayor Joy, Council. It's been a few months since I've last provided an update, so it's been a pretty decent quarter that we've had, both call volume-wise, staffing-wise, some public engagement. We'll start out with our staffing levels. Of our 92 regular members, we currently have 2 vacant positions, but they're being filled here very quickly. One member is going from Lac La Biche, another from Wood Buffalo. We've been pretty fortunate here at Parkland Detachment to be able to maintain our staffing levels, better than some others throughout the division, but it's kind of a testament to people want to come to Parkland Detachment. We have good work here, beautiful building, as you all know, and it's just a good place to work. Just on that note, the RCMP and all policing services really in Canada and throughout North America are having a hard time recruiting these days. It's just things have changed over the last few years with policing and certainly having difficulties recruiting. So you'll notice that most of our public events that we go to, we'll always have recruiting material there and encouraging people, if they want to talk about recruiting, we're more than willing to chat to them about it. So just encourage anybody that is interested to visit the RCMP website or speak to any of our members or call our office there. We did have a recruitment drive to our K Division recruiting folks were out about a month and a half ago and did a coffee shop talk in hopes of recruiting some folks. If you've had a chance to look at some of our stats over the last quarter, I provided them for the first 3 months of this year. I think there's about 50 different stats or so on there. There's a handful that kind of stood out to me. that we've seen a little bit of an increase. Nothing dramatic, but there has been a slight increase in robberies, break-and-enters, thefts, and frauds. So in order to address some of those issues over the last quarter, we've done a number of different crime prevention seminars within the town of Stony Plain. We've done a lot throughout our detachment area, but I'll speak to the one specific to Stony Plain itself. In February, one of our members came and spoke at the Chamber of Commerce committee there. They did a crime prevention seminar there. In both February and March, we did family violence seminars. They were fairly well attended, and so well attended that we're going to host 2 more. Maybe not specifically in Stony Plain, but within our detachment area. So anybody who's interested in attending one of those, it'll be on Eventbrite in the coming weeks. We also had a member of our community policing unit come and speak at the Family Connections there and did a fraud presentation. And there's 21 people attend that event, which is a good showing. So when you just look at some of those stats, with our robberies, it shows a big increase, but it went from 1 last year during this reporting period to 5. The good news with that, out of those 5, we caught 4 of those individuals and charged them, and they're currently before the courts. The 5th one was sort of a unique situation where all the parties knew each other, and that one was resolved outside of the court process. As well, our frauds have increased. A lot of those stem from telephone frauds. Still a lot of people getting defrauded over the phone, whether it's a grandparent scam or any other type of scam. But we did do the one presentation, and we're ramping up to do some more advertising on that. I guess if it's too good to be, sounds too good to be true, it is. And just be very wary if somebody's calling to try to solicit any information from you. I also mentioned some of the thefts that have increased. Some of those thefts that you'll see on the stats involve catalytic converters. And that's the type of crime that really goes in waves. You may have heard our commanding officer from Canadian Division say that 58% of the crime is committed by the top 100 prolific offenders. And we really notice that in our area too, where we'll get one individual out of jail, and when they're out, we'll see certain types of crime increase. And catalytic converters thefts are a prime example of that. If that's one person's MO, they'll get out and they'll be hitting those fairly frequently. You may have heard of our initiative that we started here probably about 5 months ago. We call it Engrave It to Save It. It's a catalytic converter program. There's 13 businesses within our detachment area, 5 within the town of Stony Plain here, businesses that are involved in that. And basically what it is, if you go into one of these businesses to get some servicing done on your vehicle, they'll offer this service free of charge. They'll engrave your catalytic converter. They'll put some heat-sensitive paint on there to mark it, so that it's visible for our members if they're driving around at night and see somebody, they pull somebody over, and then in the back of the truck they've got a half a dozen of catalytic converters. It's because they don't have a serial number on them from the factory, it's difficult for us to be able to prove that charge. Through this program, these garages engrave the serial number onto there, so a little easier for us to put 2 and 2 together. There's a few other reasons this program, we expect that it should work. When you etch that metal, or when you put the paint on it, it devalues the metal as well. So we're hoping that that's another deterrent, not only that we're hoping to catch them, but we're hoping people will see that and realize that it's not as valuable as another one. So we are encouraging people to participate in that as well. We've got a number of upcoming events over the next quarter that we're preparing for within the town of Stony Plain. On Friday here, May 5th, we've got members participating in the Walk to End Violence. The following day, on May 6th, just outside here, we're participating in the Emergency Preparedness Day. May 27th, we're hosting an event at our detachment. Some of you may have heard that it is the RCMP's 150th anniversary this year, coming up here in about 3 weeks. And on May 27th, we're hosting an event, sort of an open house, where we're going to display some of our equipment and have a variety of events for kids and adults alike to participate in. So we're hoping for good weather, and encourage everybody to come out. And then the final one is, of course, Farmers Day is always a big event for the town, and we are engaged. We've got, we're working with the Kinsman Club and have helped them with a traffic safety plan, and we're preparing our resources for that weekend as well. The only other, well, a couple more things. The one, we've got, as you're all aware, the top half of our detachment, about 50% of it is still undeveloped. When we've been looking for renters within the RCMP, and we found one unit that has just moved in. They're squeezing into our space for the time being until a section of that can be developed, but there are 12 members from the provincial traffic unit. So we've already got Capital West traffic in there, but this is basically the provincial management team. There's a superintendent, an inspector, and a number of sergeants and staff sergeants that oversee different realms of traffic services, whether it's impaired driving or traffic reconstructions, that sort of thing. So there's 12 new renters that have moved into our building. Just the last thing that I was going to touch on, this one's not nothing set in stone here yet, but we're hoping, I've been working with K-Division in trying to get an RPAC team out here. So that's basically a RCMP member partnered with a mental health nurse, and they'll attend some of our mental health calls, assist with those on the outset, but also follow up with these individuals in the days and weeks following to make sure that everything's going well, and it's been proven to work in other places. We access those resources now out of K-Division or out of the city, but you know, there's a half-hour drive in between, and we're a fairly big user of them out here. So if all goes according to plan, the next time I come out, I can tell you that we've got 2 of those teams out here, but that's what we're working on right now. That's my presentation, subject to any questions.
Thank you, Inspector, for your time, and definitely your presentation is always very informative to see the trends for the last quarter and to see if there's any areas of concern for us, and I think you pointed them out, so I appreciate that. Members of Council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Loyens?
Thank you, Your Worship. Inspector, last time you were here, we were talking about the body-worn cameras. I was just wondering if you can give us an update on that.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. They were actually supposed to start today, but as you may have heard, there was a public service walkout the last couple of weeks. So that's been pushed back, so I don't have a firm date, but it was supposed to be today. It will be within the next couple of weeks that's being rolled out here. So just as a refresher, Parkland Detachment, as well as 2 others, I think it's Grand Prairie and St. Paul, have been selected to participate in the test phase of this rollout.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the inspector, I'm just on page 8 of 171. That may not be your page 8 if you're looking directly at your report. There is reference made at the top of that chart, which speaks 4 times to drug enforcement, production, possession, trafficking, and others. Those categories have either flatlined right at the bottom of each category, or they have dropped severely. Is the issue that drug issues are no issue, or is the issue that enforcement isn't happening or not deemed to be an issue at the detachment?
I think drug use is certainly involved in a lot of the things that we are involved with. What's reflected in a lot of these stats is the change in legislation with the legalization of cannabis. And under other bills as well, they're taking a bit of a different approach to it, more prevention and that sort of thing. But specifically to the charges, it's mostly related to the legalization of cannabis, just because it's not illegal anymore. So we're not charging people for simple possession or trafficking or production, that sort of thing.
Okay, further to that, Mr. Mayor, a follow-up on that, Ben. So if two of these categories are flatlined right at the bottom, surely marijuana use, cannabis use, was not the only issue in drugs, was it? Are there no other drug issues rearing their ugly heads?
There's certainly are, and so. Which two are you referring to?
Right at the top, and I'm looking, it's on page 8 of our package,
Okay, yes.
which is
So
the second page of the charts.
so the production there.
Yes.
Is that zero? Yeah, it's been at zero for the last 5 years. Simply what that means is that within the town of Stony Plain, we have not located and charged anybody with the production of any of these substances. So we didn't locate any meth labs, we didn't locate any marijuana grows, anything like that. With regards to some of the possession refers to simple possession, so that would be a person that's in a small amount of it for personal use. Again, those have, it's fluctuated over the last 5 years, 6, 3, 6, 7, 2. So not a big variance. The trafficking has come down a bit from 8 in 2019 to 4 to 8, 2 last year and 2 this year. What I can say in regards to the trafficking, because that's one of the main ones that we focus on is trafficking. It's not always, how do I say it? I guess crime doesn't have any borders. So we may be targeting somebody from Stony Plain that's trafficking, but we may pick them up, say, traveling back from Edmonton. Depending on how the investigation goes. So the actual charge would be laid from Parkland County if we're out on the highway or something like that. So it might not be reflected in Stony stats per se. These are specific to Stony Plain. Some of them may even be within the city of Edmonton because our folks will travel different jurisdictions as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Anderson? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for being here again. It's always interesting to kind of see how the numbers flush out kind of throughout the year. So we certainly appreciate you bringing this forward. I have a couple of questions connected and related, but they're kind of a little bit different. So the first, I think the last time you were here with us, you had referenced a possibility of a social media account for the Parkland detachment. And I'm going to give you my second question at the same time because they are connected. Engrave it to save it, you had brought up in terms of the catalytic converters, and I was looking this evening to see what I could find in terms of how we were promoting that within our municipality or how the RCMP were promoting that within the region. And the only piece I could find was our neighbors to the east had something on their city page. And so two-part question. One, just kind of where are things at with the social media? And that would lead into how are we able to then publicly share some of these initiatives that the RCMP are undertaking?
So with regards to our Facebook page specifically, Facebook itself has changed some of its regulations, and it's more difficult to get a page now if you're not an individual. So we're told that it's going to be able to be overcome, but I haven't seen that yet, and it's been a number of months. We are utilizing our K-Division RCMP Facebook page, so I encourage anybody to follow that. They will promote our stuff on there as well. In regards to what we've done to promote it, it's mostly through a lot of our meetings, through Rural Crime Watch, that sort of thing, the COP program. When we initially rolled it out there about 5 or 6 months ago, there was a number of media interviews and stuff done, and that's where, I will admit, Leduc did a similar project to this. That's where we got the guts of ours from. And once we rolled ours out, our community policing unit received a number of calls from Calgary, Edmonton, and various communities that are rolling it out as well. So it's a good reminder. Maybe it's time for us to do another reminder through our media accounts. With regards to the town of Stony Plain and our different municipalities, some of them pick those up too and put them on their website. I'm not sure if it's on the town of Stony Plains one or not, but certainly something if somebody from the town could do that, that would be great.
Yeah, and I appreciate the commentary there, which was going to be how I concluded my thoughts today, but I wasn't able to find anything on the town page. I do find reference to Parkland Capture. I think there's another reference there to the crime mapping tool that's available, encouraging residents to ensure things are being reported as they're seen and how that information is utilized and tracked and that sort of thing at the detachment level. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to administration, if we can look into that and have, engrave it to save it added to the enforcement section of our website. I know there were two specific questions that I had when I first looked at this. And one is which locations within our community, which businesses are a part of this? When I first heard of engrave it to save it, it was one. I saw a news article, I don't know, February maybe, we were up to 3. But it was a little bit challenging to find the information. For interest's sake, I contacted one of these businesses to see about my vehicle, and they let me know I wasn't eligible. And that was due to the type of vehicle I drive being so low to the ground that they really didn't see those thefts. And so if there's a way that we can make that information available in terms of eligibility and locations for our residents, I think that'd be awesome. So thank you.
Excellent. If I can just put a quick plug in, it is Stoney Auto, G&B Auto, Mawasan Auto, Binks Auto, and Tirecraft in town here.
Okay, so 5 now. Perfect, thank you.
Appreciate it. Any other questions for clear and understanding? See none? A question regarding the roadside suspensions, and that's something new that we've done. So over the last quarter, have you noticed that with the additional workload there, has that been a hamper on how we're doing our regular duties?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
So with the new road suspension initiative that started, this year, right? So there's definitely a lot more work for our officers. So has that increased workload there hampered the way that we're doing our regular patrols?
Potentially more work, but potentially less work too. They've changed it in that we now can do provincial sanctions. So as opposed to arresting somebody under the criminal code and processing somebody criminally for an impaired, we have the ability to go by provincial sanctions, which is a lot more efficient, quite honestly. It carries pretty much all the same penalties, except that a person does not get a criminal record out of it. There's still a license suspension, there's a fine, there's a need for an interlock device, and it's a lot less time consuming than processing an actual impaired.
Yeah, okay, thank you, that's good to hear. And just, can you comment on the B&E for business theft? It's gone up from 2 last quarter of last year to 13, which is kind of a huge increase.
Yeah, it is a big increase. That is one that I've got flagged here as well. There's no specific rhyme or reason that we can see why that's happening. I always go back to the prolific offenders. If you see an increase in a specific type of crime over a short period of time, it's probably due to 1 or 2 people. And if somebody's targeting businesses, that's their MO, then we'll get a rash of them all at once until we catch that person, and then you'll typically see it subside for a while. So nothing really that stands out as to why or who, but we have definitely noticed that increase. So with that, what we do is our crime analyst, we have a civilian crime analyst at our office that keeps track of a lot of these things, and he will let us know where the hot spots are, and that's where. So if we know that B&Es are happening in Stony Plain between 4 and 6 a.m. on certain days of the week, that's where we increase our patrols during that time. So hopefully I can come here in 3 more months and we'll see that number decrease.
Okay. And then another question I have is in terms of speeding. I think our CPOs have done a really good job of kind of enforcing that. We also have Ford Radar, which we typically do in school zones, construction zones, and just make sure that everybody's slowing down. But I noticed that's increased a little over double from last year. So is that an issue that we need to kind of keep an eye on and maybe increase the phone enforcement to certain areas of the town?
What's interesting about a stat like speeding, it fluctuates on maybe not how many people are actually speeding, but how much enforcement we're actually doing. So about 6 months ago or so, or 8 months ago, we dedicated a traffic member between Stony Plain and Spruce Grove, and his sole function is to go out and enforce provincial sanction or provincial offenses, including speeding. So I hope that you've seen more visibility in town. There's been a lot of joint check stops and joint enforcement efforts with our CPO partners, and I know he's done a lot with Stony Plain CPOs. So that's why we see an increase in that, is simply because not that there's more people speeding, but we've dedicated somebody to enforce that. That was brought up through our CPAC committee and was identified as an issue within Stony Plain, and other types of those offenses within Spruce Grove too, more around the noise and that sort of thing of vehicles. But that was our effort of trying to address some of those concerns.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate those answers. Any other questions for clarity understanding? Okay, see none. Thank you very much for your work, and look for the continued excellence of service that we receive from the RCMP.
Thank you.
I think there'll be a couple councillors at the May 27th event. Unfortunately, I will not be there, so.
Sounds good. We'll see some of you
yes.
there.
But somebody will be there for representing the town. Okay, members of council, moving on. Our agenda 4.2 is the presentation from the St. Michael's Health Group. So welcome, and thank you for taking us on the tour a couple weeks ago. Appreciated that. If you can just, again, speak directly into the mic and just introduce who you are.
We don't get any feedback from the hearing aids.
Okay.
First off, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank council for allowing us to present.
Yeah, can you use the mic? And just, this doesn't pick up.
Yeah, first off, I'd like to technology literature.
Yes, it's technology is also really hard, and because of the system that we have is that you actually have to speak and look directly into the mic before it catches you. A little off to the side, it doesn't pick up. So.
No problem. Anyway, first off, I'd like to thank council for allowing us this opportunity to present before council about our Fenwick Assisted Living Project. The mandate of our board was to ensure that we present to each
Can you
of
actually
each of the three.
yeah, actually, if you somehow turn the mic so actually you're speaking into it and not to the side of it.
Like that?
Yes.
How's that? Is that
That's
better? Okay.
100%.
I can start again. I apologize. But anyway, on behalf of St. Michael's Health Group, I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak before your council. The mandate of our board was to ensure that we talk to all three councils in the Tri-Region. I've had Tri-Region drilled into me for 22 years. Pat, I think you know that. And so it's very important that we do this. And with that, you're going to have a lot of questions answered, I think, when you see the presentation, and I'm sure you may have some questions after. And Christine Tetatenko is going to do the presentation for us.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Choi, City Councilors. My name is Christine Tetarenko, and I'm the Director of Supportive Living for St. Michael's Health Group. And as many of you probably know, Bill Steinberg here, he is a member of our Board of Directors. So today I'm going to be giving you an update on our facility that we are building on the far east side of Spruce Grove called Fenwick Heights. Many of you may have heard about it or driven by it. And it is a facility that's going to be serving seniors throughout the Tri-Region area as well as beyond. Sorry, technical challenges here. Thank you. For those of you who may not be aware, St. Michael's Health Group is a not-for-profit organization that has been in existence for over 45 years. We started out in the business of a nursing home and expanded into supportive living, primarily Edmonton, but then branched out to Spruce Grove and other communities. Our mission is care with love and dignity, and all types of facilities that we have follow that vision and mission very closely. We do have 4 facilities, 2 in Edmonton, 1 in Vegreville, and 1 in Grove Manor in Spruce Grove. The long-term care that we started with is in Edmonton. From there, we branched out into lodge living and built a connecting lodge in Edmonton. Then a facility in Vegreville, Alberta, which is an assisted living facility, and shortly thereafter, a facility in Spruce Grove, which is called Grove Manor. We quickly outgrew our facility in Spruce Grove, and we realized that we had to branch out, and therefore embarked on our Fenwick Heights project. Recently, we have also taken over the management of some seniors self-contained apartments in Edmonton, and are doing that on behalf of the government of Alberta. So our facility in Spruce Grove, our current facility is 71 suites. It is primarily independent living, but we do have supportive services like home care, meals, laundry, recreation, and we have had a waiting list since the day that we opened. The demographic that we serve in all our facilities, regardless of the care, are the average age of our residents is about 84. We're seeing more and more people wait until they need more supports to move into facilities, but the average age overall is still 84. In Grove Manor and in our other assisted living facilities, we cater to the lower and middle income client, and we will be doing so in Fenwick as well. So when we first embarked on this, we did some independent market research, and we identified that there was a need not only in this community but beyond for seniors housing and care of all levels. And the affordable and market rent housing for seniors was one that was highly identifiable. Alberta Health Services did, every few years they release a list of priority communities, and I'm sure that you probably have seen this, but Spruce Grove, Stony Plain was identified as being urgent, which is probably the top priority for needing supportive living and long-term care. So our project began probably about 5 years ago when we purchased some land at the very east side of Spruce Grove. We purchased 6.3 acres of land and have divided it up into 3 phases. Currently, what we're working on is phase 1, and this is our 170-unit independent living facility with support services. So that's what you see in red on the slide. So this project is a $54 million project that St. Michael's is financing on their own. So we've received no government funding for this project. Phase 1A is on the north side of the property. We actually sold off a part of that property to a private developer, and they are building a combined commercial and residential development, which I believe will be starting in the very near future. And their services that they're going to be offering on the commercial side are going to be geared towards seniors, so things like physiotherapy, hearing, medical services, and whatnot, and then residential on the two top stories. Phase 2 is the south end of the property, and that is a future phase that we are hoping to get government funding for to build an even higher level of care. So that would be designated supportive living for the and long-term care, and that will be connected to our Fenwick Heights facility. So the location is at 260 Pioneer Road, and so that is Pioneer Road just south of Grove Drive. We had our groundbreaking event in August of 2021, so we're about a year and a half into our construction right now. And this is a rendering of what the building is going to be look like. As you can see, we do have some outdoor spaces with some units having balconies. And we also have a very nice terrace that's being built on the very front of the building, and that'll be for our resident use, and that faces to the west. And so these are a little bit more current photos of what we are looking like right now. We're actually at about 80% completion of the project. We are hoping and on track for the construction to finish at the end of June of this year, and then it'll be turned over to us, and we have a couple of months of work on our end on the interior that we'll have to do, and we hope to have residents starting to move in September. So the photo on the left here shows the terrace, and some of the units on that side of that building will have their own little private patios in addition to access to that terrace. The main floor of the facility is all amenities and services, and all the suites are from floors 2 to 5. So we've actually overbuilt on certain areas of this building, one being the kitchen area, and one being our multipurpose area, and that is in anticipation that we will be going to phase 2 at some point and will not have to build a second kitchen or more community space. These are just photos of some of the kitchen. These were taken probably about a month ago. We've actually advanced quite a bit further from this since then. We have 10 different types of units. This is just a typical floor plan of our level 2. So they range from a studio to all the way to a 2-bedroom, 2-bath unit. So of course, the rents range from about $2,000 up to about $5,000, depending on the type of unit and the type of services that the resident would want. Included in the rent are the utilities and 1 meal a day in the dining room. And then the residents have a choice of whether or not they want to participate in a breakfast or lunch program as well. And then we have other optional services available for them should they need or want them. This is just a photo of the construction. This is one of our premium suites. So our premium suites are classified as having an outdoor area, so either a balcony or a terrace. As well, they'll have upgraded finishes and a little bit more square footage. This is just another view of our terrace area. We anticipate this being a very popular public space. We do actually have a bit of a public area for the residents in the back of the building too, facing the ravine. And it'll just be a little bit more of a nature area for them there. Again, just some more photos of our terrace area in progress of construction. So some of the services that are available, I should add, housekeeping is also included with the rent. So once a week they'll get housekeeping. So housekeeping included in the rent. Laundry is an optional service, as is home care. We also have in-suite laundry available for the premium suites and for some of the other suites should a resident want them on a rental basis. We have 2 food areas for the residents, the one being the dining room where their meals will be held. Again, I'd mentioned that dinner is included and breakfast and lunch is an option. We also will have a bistro on site that will be available for resident use as well as open to the public. Some other amenities include a library and lounge, a hair and nail salon, fitness room, and tub spa services. We will have recreational programming at least 5 days a week, if not 7, depending on demand. And as mentioned earlier, we have a large multi-purpose space that we will be working with the communities of Spruce Grove, Stony Plain, and beyond to bring in some public programming, workshops, and even make it available for rental. is a large economic impact to the community with this project. Currently, we are averaging between 90 to 100 workers on the job site a day, and that's Monday to Friday. But over the course of the entire construction phase, we've estimated over 900 individuals will have been on site. We will be launching a capital campaign for this project. We are in a silent phase right now where we've actually raised $3 million of our $9 million goal already. And then we are going to be making some more information available to everyone soon. So this is a timeline of our construction. As you can see by the red dot, we are near the completion stage. And with our grand opening, we've stated it as September 1st, but that's just a ballpark. We'll probably be closer to mid-September, given the way things are going right now. And that's the end of the presentation. Are there any questions?
Okay. Thank you for the presentation and then the slideshow. It's nice to see kind of visually what it could look like. As you mentioned, it's still in like 80% construction. A couple weeks ago, members of council had the opportunity to tour it, so thank you very much. So we had a first-hand tour looking at some of the rooms and seeing the amenity for a region. So thank you. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad to see you in council chambers. Could you share with us, unless it's a secret, what the average rents are? And I know you've got different floor plans and a studio certainly would be less expensive. A lot of people are asking about it and trying to get their names on a list and that kind of thing. Can you let us know where you are with placement of people in the units? I've got 2 neighbors on my street who have their names with you and thought they would be moving in May, and now they're being told, I think, August, which they're happy that it's not this quickly going to happen for them. Give us an idea about the rents. And when you say that you're a nonprofit, and that's why you're going into a capital campaign to help pay the cost to keep the rents down, I suppose, can you let us know, I guess, in the whole scheme of things, how the nonprofit aspect comes to play in the rents that are being charged?
Okay, let's start with the rents. So with the studio suites, we only have one type of studio suite. So for example, the rent is $1,965. So as I mentioned, that includes the utilities, that includes 1 meal a day and once a week housekeeping. So there are additional services that are optional if a resident wants them. We have the highest number of 1-bedroom suites in our buildings. So for example, a 1-bedroom suite is $2,485, and again, inclusive of those other elements that I spoke to earlier. We go up to the largest unit we have, which is a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit with a balcony, and that one is $4,855.
Okay.
And so there's your range right there. As far as getting your name on a list, we just opened up, I guess you can call it a sales office, a sales trailer on site. The phone number that is listed with Vendic Heights goes directly there, and we have somebody there 2 days a week, taking appointments to meet with anybody who would like to meet with them. We also have a website that people can visit, and we have, you can contact us by email for questions as well. We are accepting deposits of $500 to hold a suite, and as we get closer to opening, those people on those lists that have given us $500 will have to still complete an application. They'll still have to complete a medical assessment because we have to ensure that we can care for them to the level that we're licensed to. And then we will speak with them about the moving in process. So yes, when we first started, we thought we would be moving people in earlier in the summer, but now it looks like towards the end of the summer, beginning of the fall is more likely. So as a not-for-profit, when we embarked on this project, we engaged with CMHC for our financing. And so part of one of their requirements is that we do offer some affordable, or rates at affordable rents. And that's a formula that they used based on market rents. So the rates that I quoted you here are, we do meet those guidelines with those rates.
Thank you.
Councilor Pledger, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and it's nice to see you in council chambers finally. So just a little bit further to Councilor Hansard's question. You make mention lower to middle income people, and yet when I look at the rents that are there, it substantially gives me a bit of concern for that lower to middle. How is that calculated on, and what is a lower income to a middle income?
So just to be clear, this isn't rent geared to income. So that's not the traditional definition of affordable housing. So lower income, I mean, there is a range. I don't know what it is to be quoted. But we've done a calculation and a comparison of what it would be for an individual to live in their home compared to in this facility. And those documents are available, and we can send them to you. We do share them with people who apply. We take everything into consideration, like property tax, maintenance, food, housekeeping or grounds maintenance, and everything like that. And it actually works out to less to live in a facility like this with only the one rental payment as it would to maintain your own home. So I guess not everybody lives on the same income, of course, but we do fall into that classification with these rents.
Any other questions? Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, and thank you to you both for being here with us this evening. I'm going to pick up on Councillor Hansard's question as well. You had mentioned when your first facility, the Grove Manor, opened, that immediately you had a wait list already. The new facility at Fenwick Heights, I think, is 170 units. I know you shared that you're starting to take deposits and those sorts of things, but can you give us an indication of maybe how many units you already have deposits on and how many might still be available?
I believe it's 110 units right now that are spoken for. So the first ones to go were our terrace suites, the ones with the private patios on the terrace, followed by the two-bedroom suites. So I don't know the exact availability of what's left right now, but the number that is that you can call, we have a staff member there who can give you all that information.
Yeah, and almost 2/3 full already,
Yeah.
and so
and
certainly...
we've actually just started our marketing.
Right.
So
a significant need that, is being met, and who knows, we may be asking you for another building shortly after this one. So the only other thought I have, and this is just a comment, but I know just walking distance from Fenwick Heights is Prescott Learning Center, which is a K-9 school. And I know that they're often in schools looking for these types of partnerships. I think there's a lot of good that can come out of having our kiddos have the opportunity to meet with and interact with some of the seniors in the area. And so not something that I can facilitate, but just an opportunity that I think is available to you. And I know the administration at the school there would love to have that conversation as you get closer to opening. So.
yeah, thank you for that suggestion. We actually at Grove Manor do work with a couple of schools already, and we fully intend to engage the schools in the area, everywhere from we actually work with a couple of daycares already too. So everywhere from like our toddlers or our little tots all the way through to high school.
Perfect. And you're actually in a good location with a couple of schools within walking distance. And I know there's a daycare, a couple of them right next door to each of those schools. So again, lots of opportunity. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Councillor Loynes?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two questions, and both of them are design related. I had asked them when I had the opportunity to tour this lovely building. My first question is in regards to the terrace. Is there a reason it didn't go all the way to the edge of the building?
This is an engineering answer, which I'm not an engineer, but our original design was going further to the end. but it had to do with, I believe, an emergency, like ladders to go down. It has to be within a certain distance from our parking lot, and we just didn't have the space to expand our parking lot any further to meet that.
Okay. And then question number 2, while touring some of the one-bedrooms, it was brought to our tour guide's attention from nurses that were there with us that some of the bathrooms seemed small in design in regards to accessibility for a walker or a wheelchair, or if there was a commode added to the toilet or anything like that. Can you just clarify if anything has been addressed or if that was ever a concern?
When we worked with the architect, they are fully compliant with being accessible.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if the nurses that you had on staff were comparing apples to apples. In an independent living facility, the accessibility isn't quite the same as, let's say, of a long-term care facility.
Okay. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other questions for clear understanding? Great. No, I have a question then. In terms of the original build of Grove Manor, what are the intentions with Grove Manor after the Fenwick is open?
We have no intentions to close it. We are keeping it open. We have heard that there is a need, so it will remain open.
Okay, thank you. And during your presentation, you mentioned on one of your slides, page 18 of 171 on our agenda package, it lists the AHS list of priority communities from September 2020. And as you highlighted that Stony Plain Spruce Grove, there was an urgent need for 170 units. From your presentation, Fenwick is 170 units. So does that mean that we have matched or met the
So that
requirements?
170 units, that's for higher level of supportive living and long-term care.
Okay.
So the 107 units that we're building in Fenwick right now does not apply to this chart, but our Phase 2 proposal of whatever that would be, would meet that requirement. But this was a 2020 survey that went out or information that went out, so I suspect that number is probably even higher by now.
Okay, so you mentioned that 170 is for higher level of
Yeah.
support than what this phase is. And does St. Michael's Group have a survey of the number of units required within this region for you to build a 170 unit facility?
We go by of what Alberta Health Services distributes. I think I'm not sure if I'm understanding your question.
Okay, so if I look under Alberta Health Services, there would be a list of how many units are required for this type of housing unit, not the 170 you listed here.
Yeah, so correct. This is the 170 pertains to, like I said, the long-term care and the higher, the SL4, SL4D. So the research that we did was our own research that we did that identified the lower levels and the need within the community. So that's the, Fenwick Heights is the SL1, SL2 lower level facility. So that is not on this chart.
Okay, yeah, that's what confused me when I was reading this chart, and when it said 170, I didn't realize it was for different
Yeah, that was
care program, and you're
that
building
was-
170 units. That just matched. and-
that just happens to match, but yeah, that would be for Phase 2.
For phase 2, okay. Thank you. Any other questions, comments for clarity? So there's no more, so thank you very much for the presentation. I do appreciate you taking the time and the opportunity to speak with us. I love the idea that there will be more or less wraparound services on Phase 1A, that the piece of parcel of property that you sold to a developer. As I mentioned, services that will, supplement the services that the residents are using. So great planning, and I think I look forward to Phase, 2 then? Yes. Long-term care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. The long-term care, we already have the land right beside where we are.
Thank you for your presentation. And for those that are sitting around the table that do not know who Bill Steinberg is, he used to be the mayor of the City of Spruce Grove and also a councillor for the City of Spruce Grove. And we have him to thank for the couple quarter sections we have to the east of our community. That was during annexation back in the 80s where Mayor Steinberg gave those quarter sections to the town of Stony Plain. So thank you very much, sir.
And you know what? We're going to be ready for some of you folks.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for your regional cooperation back then. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
All right, moving on with our presentations. Number 4.3 is the presentation from the Westview Health Center Foundation. So, welcome. And again, if you can just introduce yourselves when you speak. Again, the mic, you have to actually speak directly into it, so you can please move the mic so it's actually right in front of you when you're speaking. That'd be awesome.
Good evening,
Where's it?
Mayor Choi, councilors, and managers. Thank you for allowing us to give this presentation to you today. My name is Susan Ritter. I am Chair of the Westview Health Center Foundation, and I'm honored to be here. Beside me, I'll let Tammy introduce herself.
Good evening, Mayor Choi and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us to present on the Westview Health Center Foundation. I am Tammy Brent, the Executive Director. A priority of the Westview Health Center Foundation is in alignment with the Westview Health Center, and it is the value of keeping patients in our community, enhancing their quality of life. Since 1983, the foundation has been in the community to enhance the services at our local hospital or health center. We are a registered charity guided and governed by a dedicated volunteer board of trustees. Our purpose is to raise funds to bridge the gap in funding at the Westview Health Center so we can support the purchase of much-needed equipment and programming at the center and in our communities. Westview Health Center was built to provide healthcare services for 50,000 residents in the Tri-region. However, it now serves a catchment area of 90,000 plus residents. Residents that choose to live, work, play, and retire in our communities should have access to excellent services. Keeping patients in their community where they have a support system is a priority for the foundation. I'd like to draw your attention to the Venn diagram on the screens. It illustrates the role the Westview Health Center Foundation plays at the site and within the community. The Westview Health Center Foundation is a primary charitable organization that supports the funding needs of all departments within the Westview Health Center site, bridging the gap between Alberta Health Services and the demands of the site for equipment to support patient care in the Tri-region. Alberta Health Services is our regional health authority tasked with supporting all health centers and hospitals in the province of Alberta. The Westview Health Center Foundation relies heavily on community support, and the dollars donated by the community to the Westview Health Center Foundation has the greatest impact in supporting the viability of the health center, positively impacting residents in our community. Here are a few examples of equipment that the foundation has helped to bridge the gap in funding, resulting in improved quality care and improved efficiencies within the departments. I'll give you a second to read this testimonial provided to us by Brenda Bell, our emergency department manager and clinical educator. Are we good?
Yes, I think it was part of our general package and council has already read it.
Okay, sorry. I'd like to bring your attention to a few key pieces of information that I feel are important. Through your generous donations, the Westview Health Center was able to provide 40 pieces of equipment to various site departments, continuing support to the Westview Health Center through the pandemic. Since 2000, through the support of the community, $2.5 million has been raised to support healthcare in our area. And one of the programs that we run in partnership with the Tri-Leisure Center, the Westview Health Center Foundation offers a subsidized program to individuals, families, and seniors that emphasizing on inclusiveness and importance of health and wellness in the Tri-Region. We have the best volunteers. Currently, we have 90-plus dedicated volunteers. Many of them are decorating cookies right now. But more volunteers are always welcome. Here are a few events that I would like to address. We launched our very first 50/50 online community cash raffle. The draw date was April 14th. Our hopes is to grow this into a bigger lottery in 3 to 5 years' time. We launched the Smile Cookie campaign today that runs through to May 7th. We are delivering a first responder wellness event June 8th, and our AGM is June 21st, to which you are all invited to attend. April 1st is the start of our 2024 fiscal year. The current goals we are focusing on are delivering a meaningful first responder event focused on recovery, resilience, and growth. We are in the final planning stages of expanding our Wishing You Wellness program from a monthly membership to an annual membership, focusing on removing the barriers to access and achieving our fundraising goal to better support the Westview Health Center. The current Smile campaign has us fundraising for 3 pieces of equipment for the operating rooms and emergency rooms. The purchase of these pieces follow the priorities set forth by AHS, reducing ER wait times, reducing wait times for surgeries, and improving patient flow. In closing, we appreciate your support, and word of mouth is the best way to inform our community of our role and the importance of the Westview Health Center Foundation. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Before I go to questions, I just want to thank you for the presentation. I think we've ordered some Smile cookies. So hopefully we'll pick them up tomorrow, because I know some members of the council are decorating the next couple of days, so I get those cookies before they decorate. I've seen how they decorate, so it's not the best. The members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for being here and sharing with us what you're up to. I'm not sure if you've seen, but council has just released our advocacy priorities as we go into an election here. And we certainly have shared interest in the Westview Health Center, and that was one of 2 priorities that we set in terms of our advocacy efforts. And so this is very well timed to have you in chambers today, so thank you for being here. You shared with us a slide with 3 pieces of equipment that you were looking to raise money for through the Smile Cookie campaign. Can you maybe provide some clarity as to how these particular pieces of equipment were chosen to be a part of the campaign? Is it, you've requested through AHS and they've kind of denied that request, but we know it's a need and that's kind of where it comes from? Or, how does this become the priority in terms of the campaign that's ongoing?
That's a great question. And through Mayor Choi, Councillor Anderson, how these pieces of equipment were chosen is it was on our hospital's wish list. And so those are needs based on demand sites, as well as trying to fulfill the priorities of the CAO from Alberta Health Services. We had a fundraising goal in mind of $25,000. So of course the pieces of equipment that was selected by site had to fit within that budget.
Okay. Is there a partnership with AHS on this? If you can raise, 50% of the cost, they'll cover the other 50%, or is these pieces are strictly funded through the campaign that you're running?
These pieces are strictly funded through our campaign. I think a really interesting piece of information that maybe a lot of the public is unaware, because I was unaware before I took this role with the foundation, is that every hospital or healthcare center requires a foundation for the money for the hospital to receive funding. It is not a given that Alberta Health Services provides basic equipment, and it may be on their need that they could provide it. If Alberta Health Services deems it not a necessity at the time, it means that our site goes without, which dramatically affects patient care. And so every funding request comes through the foundation, and only at that time, if we deny the funding request, will AHS take a look at that request.
Okay, lots to unpack there, and certainly some advocacy that we can hopefully partner in and as a part of that conversation. But I know that the Westview Health Center is important to members of council, and I've heard that, I think, from everybody sitting up here. And so, know that you have our support. I know there's many decorating cookies this week. I wasn't able to this year, but have in the past. But know that we appreciate all you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Any other questions, comments for clarity? See none? So again, thank you. Just want to touching on what you kind of commented earlier with Councillor Anderson's question is that it's very sad that the provincial government does not fund the health center appropriately. That it falls on the foundation to raise dollars and fundraise for equipment that is necessary for basic life, making sure that the clients are taken care of, which we have a provincial election that's happening, so it's a good time for us to advocate. And as mentioned by Councillor Anderson, Westview Health Center is one of our top priorities. So between that and the recreational center that we're looking at, it's 1-2. So we'll be at the doorsteps of all the members that come forward to our communities and asking for our support. We'll be asking where do they sit in terms of funding properly the Westview Health Center, so that the residents of our communities get the service that they require. And I think if that happens, then the foundation can focus on making sure that the patient's quality of life and enjoyment is better, not the necessities of life should be supported. Taking patients out for a walk around, having volunteers, bring something in, some flowers, just to brighten their day. Not that we need this equipment. Like, you should not be doing that. And I feel really bad that the foundation is having to raise dollars for equipment that we need at the health center. So, as mentioned, if anything that we can do to help you in your advocacy, let us know, and we'll be there behind you.
That sounds great. Thank you for your support.
Okay. Thank you for your work. Thank you.
Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for your support. It made my life easier when volunteers like yourselves come through for the Smile Cookie. This year, again, with the change of time of year, Tim Hortons corporate office decided to move it from September to May. So again, it was very appreciative when I was looking for 90 volunteers that I got 85 in a matter of 2 weeks. So that speaks largely for our community. It's well known out there that 100% of the proceeds go towards this equipment. And again, it is meeting the AHS initiative of the province to make wait times reduced and also to expedite the operating procedures as well. So again, I thank you for your time and allowing us to give this presentation.
Okay. Thank you, and have a good evening. Okay, members of council, let's take a quick 10-minute recess, and we'll come back and finish our agenda tonight. No, 10 more minutes. 10 more minutes. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, members of council. Back to our agenda. We're on to number 5, which is the adoption of committee minutes. So 5.1 is the Governance and Priorities Committee from April 3rd. Members of council had the opportunity to read it. Any errors, omissions? Seeing none. Councillor Meyer, birthday boy.
Thank you, Your Worship, and for pointing out that it's my birthday. That the April 3rd, 2023 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting minutes be presented as presented.
Okay, thank you. Any debate on the motion? Call the question, all in favor? That's carried 7. Okay, move on to business item 6.1. And it's the RCMP update presentation. Earlier during item 4, we had a presentation from the inspector, just providing some updates, and we're just going to accept it for information. Councillor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that the RCMP Q1 report be accepted for information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments on the presentation or the motion itself? No. Just maybe with one question to administration. One of the issues that we saw there was a concern that was raised out in the presentation was the amount of speeding. And the answer was now we're just going to enforcing it more. So not like there's more or less speeders in our community, but we're just enforcing it more. So is there an opportunity throughout the summer months for more enforcement? As definitely, personally myself and members of council have heard a lot of calls in terms of speeding on the main arterials. So 628, 779, 16A, Veterans Boulevard, Fairways, Golf Course Road. So those are the kind of main ones that we typically hear about. Any comments about increasing enforcement?
Your Worship, through the members of council, certainly Inspector McGilvery did communicate that from time to time we do joint force operations with the RCMP. 2 spots that we know are hot spots for sure, and certainly those that you've noted tonight, we can definitely put that in our game plan for that targeted enforcement. A little different automated traffic goes to the registered owner. Sometimes the targeted enforcement in terms of getting out of the vehicle and writing a ticket is a bit of a harder pill for people to swallow because the demerits then do come into play because you're issuing it directly to the person that's driving the vehicle versus just the registered owner. So we do a fair bit of that with the RCMP. Them dedicating an officer certainly helps us in terms of the number of man hours that we can put and dedicate towards that. And we do have some spots where automated traffic is not permitted. We do currently have a moratorium on adding automated traffic devices, control areas, or intersection safety or those types of things to our program because the provincial government is continuing to do a review on that particular program. So certainly we can work with Inspector McGilvery and his team to ensure that we do a bit more concerted effort or a higher volume of those types of operations.
Thank you.
Your Worship, maybe just supplement the General Manager's comments to Council will recall that the corporate plan included the creation of another CPO position. That position was hired some time ago. Council may or may not be aware that it does take time to get their approvals through the Solicitor General, and that person is approved, so to speak. I'm not sure if that's quite the right word, but is authorized now and is out in the community. So whether it's speed controls or what have you, that individual has up and running in the community at this point. So.
Okay, thank you for the update. Members of council, any other questions? Okay. We'll call the question, all in favor? And that is carried 7. Okay, move on to 6.2, and it's the 2023 first quarter report. Go ahead, administration. Yes, 6.2. 6.1 was moved by Councillor Anderson, and that was carried 7-0.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the council is the first case report.
Your mic's not on.
Okay, start over. Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. In front of council is the quarterly report that we provide to council. It again contains numerous different pieces of information, some numbers, some text, some narrative, and at this point in time, Your Worship, certainly myself and the team can answer any questions council may have pertaining to the information contained therein.
Thank you. Any highlights the administration wants to bring forward?
No, Your Worship, no specific highlights, I don't think at this point. Again, the only comment I would add further is just we do use this to communicate to the public as well. So the information, some of it will be new to council, some of it won't. But we also utilize it as a communication tool with the general public as well.
Okay. Thank you. So members of council, you had the opportunity to read the report. Questions and comments for clarity and understanding. Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
I do have two questions. The first one, just turning to page 70 of 171 and the Q1 highlights under economic development. Through you to administration, it mentions here Edmonton Global shared 4 site collection or site location opportunities that we weren't able to capitalize on. I was wondering if administration could elaborate maybe what some of those criteria that we were unable to meet were.
Okay. That's a good pickup. Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer, I don't have the specifics of the criteria in front of me. However, typically proposals are submitted to our administration for review that have fairly high-level requirements related to site-specific details, land use requirements, and access to certain transportation linkages that provide support to the services or products that they are producing. So those criteria, I would say, are very high-level criteria that we can either quickly understand and have sites that would meet that criteria or not. So it's a fairly expedited process. Once the criteria is determined as to whether we are eligible or not, then there's a further submission process with more details with regards to the site and how the community might be able to fit further with the understanding of the investment opportunity. But the initial stage is a very high-level list of criteria that's very often very site-specific that we either can achieve or not.
So that kind of leads me to a question. I wonder, how would council know if there was something from our end that we could improve on or work on? So I guess the question is, how often does this happen? Is it enough times that administration would bring us some type of reporting on our criteria and like I say, so that council could look at maybe improving some of these situations?
Certainly the criteria and the eligibility is tracked through our economic development team. If there is any criteria that or opportunities that are perhaps where there is an opportunity for improvement or investment readiness improvement, that information is usually tracked through our economic development team. It's usually typically identified through some of our work that we would do, for example, on our highway development strategy that was just recently under development. We do track these criteria and understand and share this information through probably our Growth and Commerce Committee would be the touch point that would provide kind of high-level understanding of any criteria that or work that we can do to improve our eligibility for the criteria that's met. And identify if there's alignment with either sectors that we're trying to target for investment or that are a good fit for the community in terms of workforce or similar industries that exist within the community. So there is work that's done through our administration to evaluate the criteria, evaluate our eligibility and where we feel that we have opportunities for improvement versus, where criteria is far out of alignment with both the sectors and our available land development that we have within the community. I hope that helps to answer the question, but certainly touch points would come through the GCC for further information or recommendations that would come forward to council.
Perfect. That actually was a great answer, and I appreciate that. I do have a sort of unrelated second question. And through you to administration, I think this might be for the Community and Protective Services manager. I asked last week regarding, in the council discussion, regarding some off-road, well, I characterized them as go-karts, I think. Anyhow, I was trying to determine from these reports whether that was maybe just an anomaly up near my neighborhood and something only I sort of am perceiving as a problem, or if that would be reflected in these numbers somewhere. So I guess that would be a question. Where would I sort of see if vehicles being driven? Would that be like the unregistered, unlicensed electrical e-bikes, go-karts, and the like? Would that be reflected in these numbers in terms of enforcement?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer, I'm just recalling the conversation. I think, again, just to recall and go back on that, e-bikes or e-vehicles, not vehicles on the road with four wheels, but e-transportation when it comes to bikes or scooters or, and scooters, I mean the two-wheel that you see, like the Lime scooters that you'd see downtown Edmonton or in larger centers. So similar to that. And mobility scooters, they would all fall into that electric category. The Traffic Safety Act does speak to those in terms of the CC output, and because you can get a motorbike that is completely electric that could be on the street. You can get cars that are completely electric that can function on the street. So there's a delineation between the two. When it comes to licensing related to those types of things, if it's not legal within our bylaws to be on our infrastructure, then it would be classified as an off-highway vehicle, which could be captured on page
It's on page
77 of that report. Under the traffic incidents, about halfway down, there was 8 of those incidents. I couldn't tell you directly what those 8 are related to. Typically, from an off-highway vehicle, that would be quads, snowmobiles, the Razor type, the 4-wheel Baja type looking vehicles that roll around the community. So if it fits within the Traffic Safety Act and it's legal to be on our infrastructure, then certainly we wouldn't be handing violations out. If it wasn't being used appropriately within our infrastructure and it was being a bit of a nuisance, then there's other violations within our community standards bylaw that we'd probably lean on related to that. So it wouldn't necessarily reflect the use of the equipment, it would reflect the action of the individual that was on that piece of equipment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Meyer, if I can just add on to your question then, because also on page 77, as the general manager mentioned, that the off-highway vehicles covers part of it, but then he also mentioned the community standards violations, if they're operating not within like the roadways and stuff. But I see on the community standards violations, there's only 1 for last quarter. So I guess that question again from Councilor Meyer is how do we pick that up? We receive quads, snowmobiles, et cetera, that get reported to ourselves and to peace officers, but there's not a lot of capturing that data. So how do we kind of match what we're hearing in complaints versus what's happening in real life?
Your Worship, rest of council, so off-highway vehicles are very challenging for us. Often you have to pull the vehicle over, and I think we're all aware of how quickly they can navigate and get away. The 8 incidents here would likely be our officers having some sort of personal contact with an owner of one of those vehicles. Often, someone will give us a license plate, or they'll tell us directly where that vehicle drove to, or we'll follow the Skidoo tracks directly into the garage. We'll knock on the door, and we'll certainly have a conversation and determine whether or not there's some enforcement action that we might need to take. So with those ones are a bit tricky. Someone driving through the ditch, we get a phone call often by the time an officer gets over there, they're likely gone, unless there's a distinguishing marker on that particular vehicle or something that we can continue to investigate related to a license plate number, absolutely know what address the person went to, and if someone's got a picture of the bike or the off-highway vehicle, certainly we do have more evidence or more ability to have a good conversation about the actions of that individual and then determine whether or not enforcement is the next step.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking at page 73 of 171, and this is in the quarterly report. First of all, I want to say I'm always impressed with the beautiful reports that come in our council package, and I'm particularly proud of our staff that seems to produce everything in-house, and yet it looks so professional. Not that the staff here are not professional, but it's wonderful, and it makes it easy to read when it's laid out so beautifully. On page 73, there's a report here about the performance of our top videos, and there's throughout the whole report, there's good feedback to us all about how many people are going to our website, how many people are promoting events and information put out by the town through various departments, communications in particular. What I'd like to know for my own, that particular video with the mayor standing there by the handy bus, I believe I shared a total of 8 times. This says on Facebook, on all mine, well, one was Twitter, but everything else was Facebook, various groups that I belong to, where I'm allowed to do that. If I shared 8 times, that means that others shared 8 times, making a total of 16. But I caught myself several times actually sharing from the mayor's post of such things. And then I realized I probably should go to the website, pick it up directly from the town and share it so that it gets logged in the stats for the town. Can someone please answer my question? Is it better to share directly from the website, or if we share from the mayor or somebody shares from me, do those count in your statistics? I want to know how to do it best so that we can up the engagement, which says a lot about how the town is trying to reach out into the community to bring people in and make them realize how important they are to us, and that we want their involvement.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Hansard and to the rest of council, just to clarify with regards to the shares, it does provide a definition just below the graphic that you're referencing, Councillor Hansard. So just to be clear, it does just capture the unique users that share the posts that were provided. And in terms of answering your question, certainly we only log and track the engagement that occurs on the town's platforms. We don't have access to the analytics for other accounts. We just have obviously the analytics for the town accounts. So only when there is engagement on the town's accounts would we be capturing and tracking that analytic information. And then I think you had asked in terms of, just to be clear, I'm answering your question, in terms of, best practices with regards to that. So certainly sharing and engaging on the town's social media platforms is what we would encourage and support and ask our users to do. However, appreciate that if we're sharing information related to the town, the messaging and reaching our audiences in whatever effective way you see fit is great, but we would always encourage sharing and engaging on the town's platform to promote and state the information that we're trying to get out to our audiences in the community and abroad.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. then I will adjust my behavior from now on. I won't share directly from you or any of the other counselors. I will use that as my signal to go to the webpage, and I encourage everybody to do the same.
Yes, and appreciate that, Councilor Hansard. And again, so when somebody shares it and somebody comments and likes your post that you shared, it's under you, so the town's complaint still does not pick up those stats.
Encourage them to go to
So
the
they actually have to
website.
go on to the actual page itself or the actual post and then like it before it registers. Any other questions, comments? Councilor Loynes?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick question from you, through you to our administration. On page 74, when it talks about the fire department training, it says training began for 9 new members. I'm curious in regards to the training, seeing as we have the double rail going through, is it up to CN or is it up to our fire department to train in regards to any type of the chemicals or hazardous material that gets shipped through our town?
I think we just had training last year about this.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Loynes, certainly we do have a partnership with CN, and last year they did bring, I would say, what they call their training units down to the yard here, and their department did go over and they looked at how do you uncouple a train, how do you disable an engine, some of the hazardous materials that come in. Likely we don't have the level of training or the level of equipment to deal with that, so we would likely call in some sort of response unit to assist with that. Our level of training would go to the point of recognizing or confirming what the product was that might have been leaked or breached, or not leaked or breached, but certainly could have a problem for our community, and we would go through the motions of evacuation or whatever the standards would be related to that particular hazardous material that might exist and might cause us a problem down the road. Certainly we do have manuals that we look at, and that has an industry standard as to what your action should be related to a particular type of chemical product, which is usually described with the diamond placard that you would see on any vehicle or train car carrying a hazardous material. We also do get, on occasion, a manifest that tells us what is going through our community from the various trains that go through. So we also do subscribe to an app which can tell us on any given day what's going through. We just type in the train, type in the car number, and it'll tell us exactly what's on that car. So fire department's quite up to speed with what's happening through our community. It certainly is one of the higher risk activities that happen in our community versus a lot of trains go through. We have had derailments within the tri-municipal region in past years, and we do have a double track, so that just increases the volume. So we do training from time to time. I would suggest that at the fire hall there's some basic training related to trains also when it comes to the recruit class. Might not necessarily get that through their basic training. They might get that as they finish their basic training and tie in with the rest of the firefighters.
You mentioned then that we do it time to time. Is there a standard set of time that we do these types of trainings, or is it kind of more sporadic?
The chief is, Your Mayor, through to Councillor Loynes, the chief is in good communication with, and we do have members on our department that have some connections with CN, so as we deem we need to do the training, they certainly do have the ability to. It would be a timing in terms of getting the equipment back out. The other opportunity we do have is on the west end of Edmonton. I think most of us have driven by right across the street from Costco. We're closer down to 121st Street, which you would take if you went to an Edmonton Oilers game. Well, at least I do. The main yard's there, and certainly our crews have gone into that particular main yard and done some training there too if we can't bring it directly out to Stony Plain.
Awesome, appreciate that, thank you.
Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, page 80 of the report. And the transit statistics, for one, just a comment, obviously we see the shift from the fixed route to the on-demand and how much more effective that is in the delivery of service. So just a kudos to administration for the recognition of that and the pivot that we did with that a year ago. I do just have a quick question in regards to the rider statistics, Stony Plain. It goes down and says Q1 total riders, 2,946. But we do have the region statistics as well. I'm curious as to what makes that rider a Stony Plain rider. Is it physical residence? Is it the start of the trip? Is it the end of the trip? Is it a combination of such? Because this is now on demand and because it is a regional system, how are we determining whether that is a Stony Plain rider or a Spruce Grove rider or a Parkland rider or an external rider?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, I can't give you that exact answer. I would have to ask that question and get that back to you. My understanding is we do get statistics, and I believe it's where the ride originates. So someone from Parkland technically could drive in, park their vehicle somewhere, and jump on an on-demand. That would be originated in Stony Plain, and we can track exactly where that original ride started and how it tracked through the system, because obviously it's through the app, so we have to go through the analytics of the app, and it's fairly unique to the individual user. So there's a bit of sifting through the information to gain that. I can't confirm for sure if the app, when you register, you put enough unique information in there that would specifically say you're a Stony Plain resident, or if it's a Parkland resident catching, or another resident from another jurisdiction catching the ride in Stony Plain, if it's the original location of the ride or the other unique markers that we would determine whether or not that's a true Stony Plain. So I will do a follow-up with you on that.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I think through your worship, what would be interesting to understand would be trips that originate in Stony Plain and trips that terminate in Stony Plain. And so I think that would give us a really good idea as to the patterns, I guess, of ridership and understanding. And then I do have one more question through you, your worship.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, your worship, regarding the on-demand transit, I've heard a couple of complaints now that at specific times in the day, rides are not being able to be booked because the system is at capacity, and particularly it is at the beginning of school and the end of school. And I heard directly from one of the drivers that we are finding more students who are taking that, particularly students who live in one municipality and go to a school in the other municipality. Parkland School Division has its own transportation division. They have their own bus network and their own bus system. And I'm just wondering, how do we coordinate and balance so that the usership of the transit system, we aren't taxing the transit system over capacity at certain points in times, and it is available, particularly when there is the more appropriate alternative transportation available, and maybe they're not taking that because what we're doing is better and more efficient. How do we counter that?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Laurie, certainly on-demand is becoming a good challenge in terms of its really good success. We are finding some challenges with respect to people are finding it very handy for themselves in terms of their scheduling and their ability for this to provide them with a benefit to get themselves in and around the region particularly. So it's certainly something that between ourselves, Spruce and Parkland, that we're tracking and looking at and determining whether or not there's other strategies that can assist. Also, a good spin-off, and this is just off the top of my head, I think the Parkland School Division is at capacity at times also, so does this help bridge some of that capacity for them? Certainly, I do appreciate your comments with respect to there's an in-school busing system and whether or not that's something that someone can make work based on their schedule or not, and this is another opportunity. We could certainly look at those numbers and just see what the percentage of user is related to that particular circumstance. But something that, if it becomes more and more of a challenge or a concern and takes away from the overall impact of the transit system, we would definitely open some dialogue up with Parkland School Division related to their strategies, their costing, and some of the barriers and reasons why people might be taking the on-demand versus the setup system already.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilor Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just going to jump to page 88 of our agenda package here, and I'm looking for maybe a bit of a history lesson. I think this may have been discussed before my time on council, but just in relation to the negative balance we see under the utility reserves, there's a note that mentions this was for internal borrowing for the school land transfer. And so just looking maybe for some commentary on that particular item and how that balance will be replaced.
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson. Yeah, it's my understanding that that will be repaid over time. Once we have the financing in place and that swap does go through, we will be replenishing those funds back into that reserve. It will take a period of time to do so.
Okay, thank you. And if, Mr. Mayor, if I may ask just a quick follow-up there. Thank you. Was that money paid to PSD in terms of the land transfer that occurred? Like, I'm just curious where that deficit came from initially and why we had to go into our reserves to borrow.
Through the mayor to Councillor Anderson, I understand that and this is just relatively new, with that transaction, I understand that we had picked up some of the front loading of the costs of the various construction, some of the deep services, and I understand that from when the transaction is supposed to be completed, I think that's supposed to be returned from the developer and replenished back into the reserve.
Okay, thank you. So we're not on the hook to build this into our budgets moving forward to make sure we replace the amount that's there. That's part of the agreement that was in place when that land transfer occurred.
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Anderson, that's correct. So yeah, that's already been transacted. So it's just that when the money becomes available and the swap is completed, the money will be transferred back to reserve.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Laurie, I'm just wondering if the comment was made about students riding the bus in another community or to another community. My question is, why does it matter? Every ride they take and pay for helps pay for the transit, does it not? Or are we at a loss on every trip that we're making? Many times there are vacant seats on the bus, and there are some students who don't go to school every day based on their schedules, or their parents drop them or whatever, but they sometimes maybe take the on-demand. So could we have some clarification on if we're running, every trip is costing us money, or does every trip paid for by a rider help pay for the service and keep the buses running for everyone's use?
Okay. So Councillor Hansard, with the transit system, it is never a revenue generator. It is subsidized by the taxpayers. I don't think that was an issue, and that wasn't what was brought up by Councillor Laurie. Councillor Laurie was worried about capacity and the times that it was fully booked, that we could not use other riderships.
Okay.
And those times were before school and after school. So we're working to see if there's a partnership with PSD, if there was an issue in terms of planning or their scheduling routes. That's why there's more usage those times. But every ride that we have generates some money back, but is at a subsidized rate from the taxpayers.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay. Seeing none, just administration to page number 70. No, maybe not, maybe 79, I think. Between 70 and 79 is a little squiggle. I'm looking at the numbers for Heritage Park. Obviously, it's good to see that the increased usage that's happening through our facilities. I'm just wondering, we have never ever rented out the Stony Plain Lions den?
Your worship, through to yourself and the rest of the council, certainly is there for opportunity for rent. Sometimes, depending on the event, it might be an area that's used for If I'm having a wedding upstairs, often the buffet line will be in that particular space. I see that it's not in there, in the numbers, but we do, on occasion, a lot of times it's thrown in as part of the upstairs rental, for sure. We don't have a lot of, or we do a lot of internal, because the room is so small, we do have a lot of internal meetings that happen up there from time to time also. So from a strictly someone goes up and rents the space or books the space specific for that, often the space is not conducive to what their rental is, so we would be recommending into the larger spaces.
Okay. Any more questions for clear understanding from council? See none, Councilor Laurie for the motion, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that the 2023 first quarter report be accepted for information.
Okay. Any debate on the motion? On behalf of council, thank you very much, administration, for providing a very good and encompassing first quarter report. It allows members of council to have a good understanding of what's happening last quarter, and also allows us as communications and members of council to share that with our residents as well. So definitely appreciate the work that's been done on the quarterly reports. Call the question, all in favor? That's carried 7. Moving to 6.3, it's the park planning and the green space that council has been talking about. Go ahead, administration.
Your Worship, we're just having some technical difficulties here. Our sustainability planner has prepared a presentation for this item, and will now present as it's coming up.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm presenting the park planning item for information. Through this presentation, I will introduce the concept of park planning, provide a rationale for park planning, introduce 2 documents to inform decisions on park planning, which will be the green space inventory and analysis and the park space guidelines, and review the next steps. So park planning is generally defined as the process of providing sustainable green spaces through the intentional design and construction of public open spaces. Currently, the park planning process in Stony Plain is envisioned to include 3 stages that are completed by different departments and business units within the town. The work being presented today relates to the first stage of the process, planning, acknowledging that additional work on the other 2 stages will need to be refined in collaboration with the planning work that is currently underway. Administration is presenting this information following recent council discussions related to parks and open spaces in Stony Plain, which continues to be a priority of council, as highlighted in the supportive infrastructure and environmental responsibility sections of the 2023 to 2026 strategic plan. By presenting the preliminary work that has been completed to date, administration hopes to start a discussion amongst council to understand specific desires and expectations to support the additional work that needs to be completed to clarify and refine the process as a whole. The first document I'll introduce is the Green Space Analysis and Inventory, which, as the name suggests, is a project that identified and analyzed the status of green spaces in Stony Plain and developed a spatial data inventory. And when I say the term green space in this case, I'm referring to the way that it's been defined within this document, which is an area of contiguous vegetation that may include parks, natural stands, gardens, sports field, street trees, and medians. And before presenting the specifics of the plans, it's important to understand how green spaces are currently acquired by the town. The provincial legislation, called the Municipal Government Act, gives municipalities the authority to require owners of a parcel of land that is the subject of a subdivision application to provide a portion of that parcel as municipal reserve, which is a municipal land designation that allows the land to be used as a public park or recreation area for school board purposes or to separate different land uses from one another. Additionally, environmental sensitive lands can be designated as environmental reserve or conservation reserve, which are two more restrictive designations that prioritize keeping environmental areas in their more natural state. Another component of green space planning is land required for utilities to service development. Municipalities can require that these portions of a subdivision area be allocated as public utility lots. Municipal reserve, conservation reserve, environmental reserve, and public utility lots are all given to the municipality as public land once a plan of subdivision is registered at land titles. The specific objectives of completing the green space analysis and inventory were to define a green space network in Stony Plain, create an inventory of green spaces, generate statistics based on the inventory, explore composition and accessibility of the green space network, and provide feasible recommendations for improving the inventory over time. And it's important to note that the methodology used in this analysis is unique to the town of Stony Plain. Therefore, these findings cannot be directly translated or compared to other municipalities at this time. The green space analysis led to categorizing green spaces into 3 types based on the primary use or function of the space. So these include natural, recreational, or utility service. And after identifying and mapping all existing green spaces into these types, administration found that there are 362.4 hectares of green space in Stony Plain. Approximately 77% are recreational, 21% are natural, and 12% are utility service. Administration divided the town into 37 neighborhood areas and analyzed the composition of green space types within each area. On average, there are approximately 9.8 hectares of green space per neighborhood area, which generally equates to an average of approximately 24.7% per neighborhood area. Administration analyzed the percentage of dwelling unit types that are within a 5-minute walk of park spaces and found that overall, 93.3% of dwelling units are within the 5-minute walk area, which includes 90.3% of all detached units, 92.6% of all semi-detached units, 100% of all fourplex units and row house units, and 98% of all multi-unit dwelling units. Administration also analyzed the percentage of dwelling unit types that are within a 5-minute drive of a park space and found that overall, 98.7% of all dwelling units are within the 5-minute drive area, which includes 97.6% of all detached units and 100% of all semi-detached units, fourplex units, row house units, and multi-unit dwelling units. The green space analysis and inventory includes a series of future considerations to improve and enhance the green space inventory for the future. These include key performance indicators that could be tracked, future projects that could be completed, and new spatial data sets that could be developed. Overall, the green space analysis and inventory provides the status of current green spaces in Stony Plain, a detailed understanding of composition and accessibility of existing green spaces, baseline data to compare against future improvements, and data to inform future green space planning. Second document being introduced is the Park Space Guidelines, which is an administrative tool to inform decision-making related to park planning. The guidelines were developed to guide development and acquisition of new recreational green spaces by establishing park space classifications, identifying suitable recreation amenities for each park space classification, incorporating fiscal considerations into the park planning process, and providing evaluation tools to make informed decisions on park planning. And to visually show the relationship of the two documents, this graphic specifies that the Park Space Guidelines is related to one specific green space type, recreational green spaces. It also highlights the 5 park space classifications within the Park Space Guidelines, which each have their own criteria and standards to guide development of future park spaces. And if council accepts this item for information this evening, administration will proceed with continuing to establish the park planning process and will report on development, progress, and major changes to the process as necessary to ensure effective implementation of the strategic plan. This concludes administration's presentation.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, and it was very informative to read the agenda package. I love the fact that we do now have analysis and inventory. You know, it's really hard to benchmark and move forward if you don't know what you have. And extremely proud that we have over 362 acres of green space within our community currently right now, and 24.7% of most neighborhoods. So that's huge. Before I go to questions for clarity and understanding from council, just the administration, do we know how that 24.7 rates to other urban municipalities in the region? Like, is that a good size percentage to have, or is other municipalities having 30 or 50% green space within their developments?
To your worship and all of council, that wasn't part of this portion of the work at this time, just based on our methodology. It's not directly to other municipalities in the region. Park planning is also a fairly new concept at this stage in the game, so we're hoping as time goes on, we'll be able to have a benchmark of something consistent to shoot for in the future. But at this point, it really is just a timestamp of where we are today, and then hopefully our decisions for park planning in the future can build on the current inventory that we have.
Well, good, thank you, and I appreciate the park space guidelines, because they'll make sure that we ensure that we keep those percentages relatively high. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Laurie.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, administration, for the presentation and the reports. I think this is some great work moving forward on some of the priorities that council's identified. I just have a question. As I read through this, I noticed that both the Stony Plain Golf Course and the outdoor pool were included as, noted amenities, park spaces, so they were part of this. Again, when we talk about that percentage of green space, we're able to include that golf course because we own the golf course, where another municipality that has a golf course probably doesn't include that because that's now a private entity. So being that the outdoor pool and the golf course are not necessarily free recreation amenities, I'm just curious how they get looped into a report, or how they get looped into the same category as, green spaces that are open and accessible to all the public without a user fee attached to them. When we look at the second report, the Parks and Green Space Guidelines, I'm almost wondering, right now, the Stony Plain Golf Course is listed under a destination park, but should it be a destination park? Because that is not, and we can get down to fine hairs. Yes, there are parts of the golf course that you can go on without having to actually pay a fee. Maybe the pool would be a better one because, you physically have to walk through and pay your fee to go through. But I'm just curious as to maybe some of the rationale around their inclusion, and why they're included the way they're included in the plan, and if there maybe is a way that they can still be identified as a part of the plan and as an amenity and part of our system, but maybe, splitting those numbers out.
Through your worship to Councillor Laurie. As defined in the plan here, areas that enable passive or active recreational uses was really the criteria that we had. So again, given that they are public, generally speaking, at least owned by the public, those were kind of within that. Now, again, a lot of the challenge with this work was we didn't have a benchmark, a standard. There wasn't an Alberta best practices sort of thing to work with. So there were a lot of different assumptions that needed to be done in order to get this level of statistics. In this case, when we went through the exercise, there are components of the golf course, I guess, as an example, that could be used, say in the winter when there's certain areas that are usable like that. So we just chose to collectively include that in this, given the definition that we chose at the time. So again, it's kind of a call. We could have included it or not. In this case, we did with that criteria listed out.
Excellent, thank you, Deputy Mayor, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And I appreciate that, and particularly in the golf course, because that amenity, turns in the wintertime to essentially a free amenity versus a paid amenity in the summertime. Again, I'm wondering, in a refinement of this report, if there may be even just some type of notation that might be worthwhile in putting in there, because that's part of the balance, and I can't remember the exact wording from the strategic plan, but it was accessible, I think maybe might have been the word, and we were looking at how do we increase the amenities available and keep them accessible, affordable, and so on and so forth. So, if every green space you had a ticket taker and you had to pay, that wouldn't be an effective way of doing it in our community. But, again, I don't want to take away from the work, because I think this is fantastic, particularly compared to not having anything beforehand. So really appreciate that, and it's just a bit of feedback that I have on it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, Councilor Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was thrilled to see this one. Anybody that knows me knows that I value being outside in our green space, and something I've asked lots of questions about in my short time on council. My first question actually was very closely related to what Councillor Laurie just shared, and that is around the inclusion of the golf course in some of the overall statistics, because it's a significant land area, and when we're talking percentage of neighborhood spaces and those sorts of things, that land area actually skews what those numbers may be. And so my first question is, approximately, do we know how many hectares or acres, preferably for me, but I can probably calculate, the golf course takes up in terms of our community land?
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, I'd have to look up the detailed statistics and numbers in the appendices of the report. But what I will say is that the golf course was given its own neighborhood area for the purposes of this report, just so it wouldn't skew any one residential neighborhood specifically. So we can get back to you with the details numbers. I just wouldn't want to misspeak at this point, but we were very aware of that when we were, doing the fairways and kind of adjacent neighborhoods, that we didn't want one to look substantially larger than the other, because we were including the golf course within one of those residential neighborhoods specifically.
Sure, and I can appreciate that for sure. May I continue, Mr. Mayor? Thank you. Just jumping to page 106, I believe this is what Mayor Choi referenced at the beginning in his commentary, that 24.7 average percentage of green space per neighborhood. But when I slide down to 114, just looking at the top line of Appendix B, it says the percentage of gross neighborhood area that's green space, and this is for the town of Stony Plain, it actually shows 10.7%. And so it looks like, from what I see, that we're talking about something similar, average percentage of green space in town, but one says 24%, one says 10.7%. And so just looking for some clarity there, please, on those numbers.
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, I'll have to look up more information here. I believe part of it might be the fact that, again, we broke it into different neighborhoods. Certain parts of the town may not have been categorized in some of those neighborhoods, because again, the area where we have green spaces are generally the urban areas, the neighborhoods, as opposed to some of the rural areas that may have been excluded. That might make the difference between the 10 versus 25%, because we're only talking about the specific neighborhoods that we delineated, the 37.
Okay, and certainly an important point of clarity when we're talking about the overall percentage of green space in our neighborhoods, right? Are we talking about the total boundaries of Stony Plain, or those areas that have been urbanized? Like, to say 24.7%, as Mayor Choi mentioned, sounds fantastic. But when we look at the breakdown, it's saying overall as a municipality, our percent of gross neighborhood area that is green space is only 10.7. That's double plus in terms of the difference in those numbers. So certainly something that I would be interested in some clarity on, whether that's tonight or in an email, however that looks. But
through your worship, just to kind of further that point, I guess a lot of that is that as an area is developed out, so say for example South Creek or West Terra, those areas are fairly built out, so that 25% I think is a very valid representative number for new neighborhoods that have been built out. If you take a place like the Brickyard, where a lot of the neighborhood remains undeveloped, as we get more land dedicated to us, that area would go up likely to about that 25%. But again, it's just the overall denominator is so large right now when you look at all of Stony Plain that, again, we can look into the number and provide more update, but that's just kind of a high-level overview.
Okay, Thank you for that. I'm going to scroll down to, page 123, and this is looking at the ASP evaluation matrix, and certainly appreciate some of the criteria that are laid out here in terms of evaluation considerations. Just for clarity, this first point, parcel size, is 10% of the gross developable area planned for parks and open spaces. We're not talking necessarily recreational green space. That could be natural areas, recreation, or utility land. Is that correct?
Through your worship, Councillor Anderson, yes, to some degree. What I would emphasize here is the 10% is what we're talking about is typically municipal reserve. So the portion that we can actually dedicate explicitly as per the provincial regulations only gives us 10%. So this is just a check to make sure that that 10% is being dedicated as per the regulations. If there's additional land as public utility lots for storm ponds or environmental reserve, that would be in and above this. But that's something that we would check, it would show up through this evaluation, but also be noted elsewhere in the criteria.
Thank you for that. Just a quick comment here, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate this tremendously. I appreciate seeing the inventory. I appreciate seeing the process that is in place. The question that I'm left with, and I don't know that this is a today answer or looking for an answer, but how do we build this into our future planning? And not just, does it meet those specific criteria, but when we're developing out, whether it's our ASPs or our subdivision plans and those sorts of things, what does this look like in terms of having usable recreation space for the residents in our community? And so an example of that, would be if we're looking at the municipal reserve, a percentage of that could be environmental and utility and leave very little recreation when that land is transferred back to us. And so, if we drive towards Edmonton and look north, before we get out of Spruce Grove, you're going to see new neighborhoods going up that already have playgrounds built and developed, and that land already allocated for the recreational component of this. And so I think that's the piece that I don't want us to lose as we move forward, is that, yes, it could be natural, yes, it could be recreational, yes, it could be utility, and they all bring something different to our community. But we want to make sure that we're not just being left with the remnant that a developer has, left in that 10%, but that we're a part of the intentional planning about where those spaces are going to go. An example of that would be those community parks, right? In our future planning, where do we expect to see those community parks, those larger parks coming into, or destination parks, sorry, I think was the name. And where do we anticipate building those so that we have an idea when we're developing sections of land or neighborhoods where we want those amenities to go. And so, again, certainly appreciate what's brought forward today, and I think it provides us a foundation for that future planning, but want to stress the importance there of the recreation piece as well when we're looking at municipal reserve coming over from our developers. So,
Okay, thank you for your comments, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Meyer?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and I'd just like to begin by echoing my fellow councillors' comments in appreciation of this report. It's very well done and very informative. I do just have a question on page, and through you to administration, on page 122, well, 121, 22, there's a chart that lists the amenity, and then it has a series of colors designating whether the amenity is standard, optional, or incompatible. Anyhow, I'm just curious how exactly this chart would be used. Because basically what I really want to ask is, so scratch that, never mind how it's going to be used. The real question is, on page 122, and I don't know if we're making comments or asking clarity or what, but I'm looking at the washrooms, and I'm just kind of curious how a destination park wouldn't have washrooms as a standard. When I look further up and it lists examples of destination parks, it
notes Rotary Park, Heritage Park, Stony Plain Golf Course, all of which, of course, have bathrooms in them. So I guess that would be the question. How could we have a destination park and a bathroom just be a suggestion or a optional? Yes.
Through your worship to Councillor Meyer, good comment. Thank you for the question. I think this is very much a starting point, and although we kind of based our existing parks on some of these things, there may be instances in the future where there are those types of park categories that don't look exactly like our current destination parks do or how we use them today. So there is a good disclaimer underneath this table that each park space will need to be evaluated specifically and will have specific requirements from administration. This is really just a guide, and if developers or members of the community come to us and want something specific, this isn't a strict you have to follow it. It's just here are some suggestions for some things you might consider. So when we do get to that detailed design stage, looking at engineering drawings, we will be reviewing those in more detail to ensure that all of the specific amenities and requirements are there for that specific park space in alignment with the town's municipal development standards. So it will be a case-by-case basis, but this is just a reference at this point, and acknowledging that our future park spaces might look a little bit different than our current ones. They may not, but really as a forward-looking document, we're not trying to categorize all of our existing park spaces into this framework, as it is meant to help us make decisions on our future ones too. So.
Okay, so we're just asking for clarity right now, right? Okay, I'll save my comment for the next part. Okay.
Councillor Pletchko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and like everybody says, you did a great job with the report. I'm just a little concerned, though, when I look at the report, I see small areas of the community missed out and other areas that are included in it. So when I look at page 138 of 171, I'm wondering why you would include the Umbak Business Park and yet you leave the North Business Park, the Industrial Park, and the RJ Industrial Park out. They're all areas that could have green space in them, but they seem to have missed. And then I look to the far side of town, out on Range Road 12, Rosenthal Estates was left out. I'm wondering if you can answer a couple of questions. How many hectares of land does Stony Plain truly sit on? How many hectares of land are undeveloped? And how many hectares of land are actually developed? And what is that total green space that we have within our community? I think that would give us a much broader prospect of what we have for true green space rather than trying to pick a specific area.
Through your worship to Councillor Pletchko, those numbers are very good to have. We don't have them handy right now, so there's something we can report back to council on. But again, very good numbers. Just specifically pointing out the map on page 138, at least the version I have here, called the Green Space Analysis and Inventory Neighborhood Area Composition, doesn't actually show any of the specific park spaces. However, if you do look at the map ahead of that, we do show areas like stormwater ponds and whatnot in the North Business Park. Other areas, environmental areas that have been denoted as either natural or public utility. I do hope we have captured all of this information in terms of what areas should be denoted as public or not.
Okay, thanks. I'll look forward to that extra report.
Okay. I think the North Business Park is divided into a couple of subsections, and there is some green space in there. Just it's a circle, and it kind of points it to it. And same with the South Business Park, where it has its own little area where there's a little circle of the green, light green, and the blue as well. So I think the other, I'm not too sure about Rosenthal's because I think there's no public parks there, or no utility green spaces as well, and I think that's why that was not captured, because there's nothing official there.
I guess what I'm trying to get at, to be honest with you, is we should be talking about the total green space within our community that we have that's developable, that's not developed, and where we can go to make sure that we have adequate, similar to Councillor Anderson, with the concern for enough green space within our community. So when I read this report, I think it's a really good report that starts with the basics of what we have and what we need. But there's a lot that we can expand from this, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is there is the opportunity to discuss much more along the way to where it is. And by knowing how many hectares our town sits on, how many more hectares we still have developable, and what is developed also speaks to it. But the other thing you talk about when you look at the purple trails that are all over the map on page 140, you talk about a 5-minute walk, but we can also see on that map there's substantial areas that have no walking area. And I think what we're trying to get at, that council's been after for some time, is the access and ability to be within a walking area for everybody within our community. So it's, like I say, it's a great start, but I think it's something that we can build on, and there's lots of momentum that the town has done within here that allows us, so that as we develop, or we see developers coming, we can be asking for certain things. And it's great, you know, you talk about a need for the reserves of 10%. Is that just simply apply to industrial land, or does that just simply apply to residential land developments? Is there nothing in the industrial side that needs to be looked at? Is there, you know, as the industrial areas grow, we see a lot of people walking around our industrial area that really have no place to go for a 10-minute or half an hour walk. And that's very common nowadays in the industrial parks, is to get someplace where people can stop for a bit of a gathering area. So just one more thing that I think we can add to the great report that's here already, just an expansion of what we're able to do so that we can have a full look at our green spaces within our community.
Okay. Thank you. So just remaining on page 138, just wondering the commentary why Meridian Meadows was not included, because I know there's a couple parks there.
Your Worship, Meridian Meadows is private land. There's actually no public land within Meridian Meadows. It's all one lot owned by one individual or organization. So again, the private area was not included in our analysis.
Okay, appreciate that. And then before I go to a motion, I think, Warren, so based on the report, it looks like 95% of our population is within a 5-minute walk of a green space or kind of a green area or a park. So does that make us a 5-minute walkable community? For green space, I mean?
I'm not sure if we have a specific definition for that, but I would allude that most of our community is within that 5-minute walking.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Councilor Lawyer with the motion, please. No, actually, no, you had that already.
I did have that.
Yes, so there's Councilor Loyens, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that town council accept the green space analysis and inventory and the park space guidelines for information.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments, debate, and accepting for information? It is just for information. Councilor Hansford, Deputy Mayor.
No debate. I do have an opinion. Your Worship, I believe something that's come very real to me, and I've always been a proponent of parks, supporter of parks. Sometimes I even think up some ideas for parks, and although it takes a little while, so around 4 years to bring them to life with the help of council and champions on council and in administration, some have actually been created that I was very supportive of. But it became very, very real to me during COVID-19 years, which I now group as 3 years, where we went into this lockdown and people felt extremely isolated, and getting out of the house was a big thing. Still couldn't gather in many cases, but parks were a place that Stony Plain offered for people to stay within their community and have a sense of freedom that didn't violate any of the rules and regulations that were severely hampering people and creating a lot of mental problems. I just wanted to say that it made me really proud to be a person living in this community, not on council at the time, to realize all the great work that had been done by previous councils and the most recent council in having the parks that we do have. So I don't think people will ever look at parks the same way again that we did once we embarked on the COVID-19 years. So it is a really important thing. And I love hearing that the council members around this table are totally supportive of the park system that we have and the park system as it will develop.
Thanks for your comments, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to my questions during clarification, I would just emphasize, sort of similar to Councillor Hansard's, the accessibility of the parks during COVID are very important, but I think about young children or parents who are responsible for those young children and the need for washrooms, and even to seniors. I think it's a bit of like an accessibility issue. If we want people to be able to use these amenities, I think it's it's a question of dignity too for some of these people, I think, to be able to access a washroom. So I would say, great report. I'd like to see more emphasis on washrooms being made available.
Okay. Thanks for your comments. Again, this is just for information, and as read in the report, that our staff will be using this as a vice baseline as we continue to move forward. But I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Okay, opposed. Thank you. Councillor Lori, you're excused. Okay, members of council, moving on to agenda item 6.4, which is the Regional Agriculture Master Plan and our context statement. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm presenting the Regional Agricultural Master Plan Regional Context Statement for information. And through this presentation, I'll introduce the concept of regional context statements, provide rationale for this work, and review the next steps. A regional context statement is a roadmap that identifies how a municipality will update its municipal development plan to align with regional plans. In this case, a regional context statement was required to be completed for the Regional Agricultural Master Plan, which is commonly referred to by its acronym RAMP. The Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board, known as the EMRB, worked with member municipalities to develop the RAMP to create a harmonized policy framework to identify and conserve prime agricultural lands in the region, minimize fragmentation and conversion of prime agricultural lands to non-agricultural uses, and promote diversification in value-added agricultural production. The RAMP established timelines for municipal requirements, which would become active once the province approved the RAMP. These timelines included generating a regional context statement within 1 year of provincial approval, updating municipal development plans within 2 years of provincial approval, and preparing an urban agriculture plan within 2 years of provincial approval. With the RAMP being approved by the province in December of 2022, these timelines are now active and member municipalities are required to fulfill their obligations. Administration is presenting this item to council to fulfill the town's regional requirements, noting that this work aligns with the governance and partners section of the 2023-2026 strategic plan. As a reminder, the town has already completed an urban agriculture plan, which was accepted by town council on October 3rd, 2022. This plan needs to be submitted to the EMRB for acceptance to fulfill the related RAMP requirement. Following acceptance of this item, town administration will submit the regional context statement and the urban agriculture plan to the EMRB for review, comment, and acceptance, and will prepare to complete a municipal development plan update to align with RAMP by December of 2024. This concludes administration's presentation.
Thank you. Members of council, questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, just a question then for, in terms of the process, what is the timeline for acceptance from the MRB after we submitted it?
Your Worship, we haven't reached out specifically to find out what the timeframe would be at this time. Once we know, we can provide an update to council, though.
Thank you. And in terms of the approval, since we're looking at the alignment with the MDP that matches our ramp kind of guidelines by December 2024. So, you know, the council's accepted the kind of the agriculture master plan for Town of Stony Plain in October 2022. Can we also already start working on the re-ramp of the MDP to match those without having the full approval from the MRB board?
To all of council, through your worship, we are beginning to work on a corporate initiative right now to propose some of that. In terms of changes to the MDP, we're starting to work through that corporate planning process to evaluate what sort of changes would be necessary. In terms of the feedback, we are expecting feedback this year from the MRB, so that would definitely guide the work into 2024.
Other questions for clarity and understanding? Councilor Pletchko for the motion, please.
Yes, thank you. Worship, that the Regional Agricultural Master Plan Regional Context Statement be accepted for information.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay. Call the question. All in favor? It's carried 6. That moves us to number 7, which is council discussion, and there's no closed session today, so from after that we'll go to adjournment. Councilor Pletchko?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if administration could provide us with a bit of an update regarding our local fire services with all of the activity that's happening around us in the region as to what our status is, please.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pletchko, certainly it's not a surprise to all of us that there's a lot of fire activity happening. Some fires started in Edmonton, as Mayor Choi opened the meeting with. There's a large fire that started at Paul Band today. There's also a fire in Yellowhead County, so on the west side of the Pembina River, and there's also another one on the east side of the Pembina River, so with Entwistle. At this time, Stony Plain Fire Department, we do have an agreement with, fire service agreement with Parkland County. In order for their apparatus and firefighters to be out doing what they need to do within their own jurisdiction, we're providing backup in the Parkland County service area from Stony Plain. Certainly, we are mindful of our own requirements as a community in terms of safeguarding our own community, so we do have systems and structures in place to ensure that we can back up Parkland County, and we can also cover our own service area also. We did put a fire ban advisory out today for Stony Plain, and Mayor Choi opened the meeting with that particular statement also. The advisory is certainly making people aware of the dry conditions that are across the province in our community. A little unique for ourselves in terms of backyard fire pits, likely not a big risk as they would be in a rural environment, but certainly we'd like people to be mindful of the size, the time that they're lighting them, making sure they have additional water and ability to put the fire out to make sure the fire's out so that it doesn't get into other properties. We did have a fire on the weekend that was started with the discarding of smoking products. And that got into the short grass underneath a deck, and it smoldered for a bit, and the wind caught it, and then it started into the structure. So did get that very quickly after we were notified, and minimize damage on that particular residence. So it's not taking much out there with the dryness. The wind is certainly drying things out. We haven't had a lot of moisture since the snow has melted, and it's certainly worse when you get into the forested areas and the rural areas for sure. If Parkland County did ask for assistance from the CREP group, so that's the Central Region Emergency Preparedness Partnership, which is 24 municipalities in the Edmonton region. Specifically, they were looking for crews to go out and support different types of fire apparatus to support the efforts out in the Entwistle area. We definitely could send some apparatus out there, but we're taking that secondary role of making sure that they can send as much apparatus and personnel out as possible from the Parkland side, and we'll make sure that we cover their service area with our own staff. Not sure what the commitment level has been from the City of Spruce Grove. They typically don't venture outside of their municipal boundaries, but I can check in and see if, there's additional assistance likely to back us up if we're out in the county. So I think between the three of us, we're certainly got the area covered quite well while Parkland County deals with this particular fire incident. The province is keenly active on both the Yellowhead County and Parkland County fires. And the Paul Band fire, my understanding is that it got away very quickly with the winds this afternoon, and it's not sure what the status of that is, but the smoke was quite black before we started the council meeting this morning. So certainly I think with 3 fires and the locations, definitely crews are probably starting to get a bit thin, so there's likely going to be some more support and more firefighting services coming from the provincial side to assist and help the municipal side of what's going on in our local jurisdiction.
Really appreciate that update. I know this weekend we had a little bit of a fire in our pit at home. We put it out very quickly. The top of the grass catches fire and it just decides where it's going. So I would highly encourage everybody within our community, no fire at all. And I would hope that our town is going to monitor that fairly close. If it gets much drier like it's supposed to, I think, there's a possibility that you should look at a full ban. The other question I have for you this evening relates to a question I ask quite often in council. Range Road 12. I'm just wondering if we've got a grading speculation for that road. It is, I've had several calls from multiple people that drive up and down that road on a regular basis, and I think you can go about 7.5 kilometers an hour. It's pretty washboardy, so.
Through your worship to Councillor Plechko, I wasn't aware of the conditions out there at the moment. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. It's something I'll pass on to crews to go inspect. As you've alluded to, there is a grading plan through the town as we use our crews. So I'll inquire as to where the status is on that this week.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the privilege of attending Horizon Stage this week with my husband, and we found ourselves sitting at the end with recognition being given to a woman who was sitting very near me. Sorry I didn't catch her name because I was kind of surprised, but she's a founding member of Horizon Stage, and they presented her with a bouquet. So I actually greeted her, and privately, not in front of the whole group, just told her that I was the deputy mayor in Stony Plain. She was thrilled to death. I think she thought I was there for her, but we went to see the play and it was excellent. So this is the first time Horizon Stage has been able to have audiences in 3 years, and they've got several performances, and I think some tickets were made available to council. If you haven't grabbed one of those opportunities, please do. It was a great experience to have live theater again available in the region. Also, I went to the Abuse in the Political Realm workshop, and that's all I have to say about that. Definitely some concerns that people have. And I'm baking cookies tomorrow at Tim Hortons on 44th Avenue, and I think you can wave at me, but I can't slip you a free cookie. So I encourage everybody to buy Smile cookies, and you can put in pre-orders and get them by the box. And we want to show Tim Hortons that we appreciate their participation to enable us to have the opportunity to volunteer and help raise money for the causes at the hospital that we heard addressed earlier this evening. And I think that's all I want to report.
Thank you. Councillor Loyens.
Thank you, Your Worship. A couple things for me today. I wanted to mention that tomorrow at the Tri-Leisure is the Tri-Regional Youth Mental Health Day, and it is going on from 4 p.m. to 7:30. It says it is available for free for the youth ages 11 to 24. Did not realize 24 was still considered a youth, but hey, we'll go with it. As well as on Friday, we have the Walk to End Violence in honor of the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, two-spirited peoples, and men and boys. And they are taking off from Stony Plains Rotary Park and heading to the Spruce Grove Skydancers Indigenous Culture Society, just off of the highway. And that is from 12 to 4. As well as our Emergency Preparedness Day is on Saturday, just outside of Town Hall. In light of everything going on around us, it is always good to be prepared. And that is all for me this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Anderson, I know you had a question regarding the one of the previous items, so go ahead with that and then continue with your comments.
Yeah, we'll jump back to that one here really quick. Couple of really quick things. Took a call from a resident this week who went to the Glen Hall Arena to watch his son play lacrosse. The gentleman we heard from uses mobility aids to get around, and just mentioned some challenges at that particular site. And so I'm just wondering if administration can maybe comment on what accessibility measures are in place at Glen Hall for those that may have a walker or a wheelchair in terms of being able to observe the activities that are happening on the ice there.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Anderson. So there's a couple opportunities from a ground level. Certainly, there's some access that staff can assist people to get to towards the end of the boards. The other opportunity is we do have a lift that will take them to the second level, and the behind the seating is quite wide, so it would accommodate a wheelchair or mobility aid in order for them to be able to sit and do what they need to do. And certainly staff are there to assist if required from that extra effort. But if someone's sitting in a wheelchair or on a scooter, definitely we do have the lift, and that would get you to the second level. And there's an opportunity, I'm trying to think on the left-hand side, if you're standing and facing out onto the ice surface versus the right-hand side, as we have the stairs going up one way and the other way, and the lift only accesses the left-hand side of the rink.
Perfect, thank you for that. And just a quick follow-up there. I know some lifts have, keys or need support from an employee or someone to be able to access that amenity. I'm just curious, at Glen Hall, is there anything that a user would require, support from staff or a key or otherwise, to be able to access that second level?
My understanding is it's available at all times, and if it's not working, then certainly I would flag in a staff member and just ask them. But certainly going in, you should be able to use that lift and get yourself to the second level.
Perfect, thank you for that. And then just some quick comments. Sometimes it takes me a little bit to process. And I know Councillor Laurie had to run out here, but just quickly back to our green space discussion today. The piece that I was trying to get to and maybe lost my words a little bit was in our Parks and Open Spaces plan from 2015. There were some recommendations for destination parks in the area of 4 hectares, and there were a couple of areas of the community that were identified in there. There were some distances from neighborhoods for community and neighborhood parks. There were amenities listed in terms of playground equipment specific to those community and neighborhood parks. And so I guess my comment would be, I look forward to seeing how our new information in terms of the analysis that's been completed and the guidelines that have been put in place will marry with those recommendations that we've had previously, and see how we can build some intentional planning into our process as we move forward for some of those park amenities and such. And so not something that needs an answer, but I think that was where I was trying to get a few minutes ago. So thank you.
Your Worship, if I maybe just a brief comment on that. So one of the things that when I first reviewed the documents that were coming into the chambers that I'll tell you I'm quite proud of. I speak often to the staff about we need to be better tomorrow than we are today. We need to be better next week than we are tomorrow. That sort of a thing. And again, having been here for quite some time now and seeing different iterations of different plans, I think we're on a very good track. I appreciated some of the dialogues and the questions that were proposed, some of the comments, because I think that's partly what the staff were looking for, was a little bit of feedback. Are we on a track? Are we something not feel quite right? Is there, what bubbles up to you kind of thing? So I think they'll take that back and really, let it percolate in their heads and see what they can do to change or to work it through. But, everything we do is in some ways incremental, and we've made another pretty strong incremental step on our planning processes there. And we will, work with council, work with community, work with developers to make those potential development plans better. And I think that's the intent overall. So, I worship through you to Councillor Anderson. Just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
Sorry, you just reminded me of the final question there, but one of the final recommendations was around storm ponds moving forward not being classified as municipal reserve. And so I'm just curious, when that 10% allocation is made by a developer today, are storm ponds part of the 10% municipal reserve that's turned over to the town?
Through your worship to Councillor Anderson, thanks for the question. I'd have to go and get back and the full answer following this. That is something that comes up when we're talking with new storm ponds with developers. We're always pushing I know our planning staff work really hard to capture that 10% within all of our new areas. They're quite committed to working with developers towards that. But certainly, I will clarify that process and how we approach storm ponds and the MR as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Right. And Councillor Meyer, not that you're last, but this is your birthday. That's why we saved you, because it is your day. Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. So some exciting news from the Stony Plain Library Board. Mrs. Lisa Old was offered the position of library director and has accepted our offer of employment. The intention is she would start the week of May 15th, although the official date is yet to be determined as she works out her leave, her notice with her current employer. Lisa comes to us with an impressive background in library services and extensive experience in managing and developing library collections, programs, and services. We are confident that Lisa will be an outstanding addition to our library. So that's the big news from the library board. And of course, it is my birthday, and there is an ice cream cake sitting in the freezer. So everybody here, please help me dispose of that cake and have a piece after the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. And the last comment goes to Mayor Gamble, as he messaged me that he is thankful for the support that the Stony Plain Fire has given Parkland County in terms of the brush fires and the wildfires that are happening. And this is quoted, please pass on praise to Stony Plain Fire. They are awesome through this. So good work for our fire department, and thank you that I'm always able to rest knowing that we have mutual aid with all our members, communities around here, that if something happens, there is and will always be someone to provide that support for each other. So with that, we're adjourned.